Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 most fun gunner overclocks in Deep Rock Galactic, at least right now. Fun is an extremely subjective term, and if you don't think that any of these are fun, perfectly fine. Tell me your top 10 down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Let's just get started. This also isn't in any particular order. These can all be very fun. Some of them I do tend to use more often than others, but they can all be very, very fun. First up at number 10, we have Burning Hell. This is for the minigun, and this essentially makes it so the minigun has a short-range flamethrower on the end of it. That is pretty cool. The only downside to this is that your minigun can overheat quicker, which may not be a downside, because if you take aggressive venting in Tier 5, then once you do overheat, deal fire damage to everything around you. Or if you take the hot bullets in Tier 5, it makes it so you can get hot bullets a little bit faster. Aside from that, there is no other downside to the minigun, and you can use it the same as a minigun. Just remember that it has a short-range flamethrower on it too, so it does really well against crowds, and really well if you want to put it right next to enemies. Pairs really well with the volatile bullets too, which makes it so you do massive damage with the revolver, and that build can be very, very fun. Coming in at our number 9 spot, we have Combat Mobility. This is for the autocannon. Combat Mobility makes it so we have a smaller magazine size overall, which can be a little bit annoying. However, we get a much tighter spread on the autocannon, so it can actually be pretty accurate. Still not as accurate as like the minigun of the Hurricane, but accurate enough. And you can also move much faster with this. There is one other upside too, and that's that it increases your rate of fire, at least the base rate of fire with the weapon, so you can get to the top rate of fire even faster. If you take the top rate of fire in Tier 2 with this one, you can actually get it with just 2 bullets, meaning that you can activate either of your Tier 5s immediately. Moving around really fast with the autocannon is pretty fun. You're still not going to be moving at 100% speed. I believe you're moving at 70% speed. But even that does make up a difference, since you can constantly be moving back and forth, and you are a little bit more nimble than you otherwise would be, which is not necessarily something Gunner is really known for. Coming in at number 8, we have a used to be very overpowered overclock with triple tech chambers for the Coil Gun. Right now, it's not nearly as overpowered, and it's actually pretty balanced, I would say. The only reason it was overpowered before is because of a bug where you could have 50% damage reduction for the entirety of a mission, which was, yeah, way too strong. That bug needed to go. What triple tech lets you do with the coil gun is once you charge up your shot, you can fire then 2 more shots after the initial shot. You do have to wait after each of these shots, though. You can technically fire the last 2 rounds, I guess, very, very fast, but it's going to be very inaccurate, and you have about a 1-second delay between these shots. The last 2 shots can't pen like the first shot can, but it still lets you have more damage per second, and it's really good once you throw electricity on this, so you can do a little bit more DPS and a little bit more crowd control by slowing stuff down. Very fun overclock, and like I said, used to be overpowered. Now it's perfectly fine. It's still a pretty decent overclock for the coil gun. Coming in at number 7, we have another coil gun overclock. This is the Mole. Mole lets you hit insanely hard. So what Mole does is every time you punch through a surface with the coil gun, you get 150 more damage per surface that you punch through. So if you make yourself a big old Swiss cheese castle and fire through it, you can basically one-shot anything. That does take a lot of time and setup and prep to do, and I wouldn't really recommend that you do it. It's not really necessary in a lot of situations. It can be fun every once in a while, but I would highly recommend that you just use this to punch through a surface or 2 just to get that extra points of damage on top of there. And the only downside to this one is that it makes it so your coil gun charges slower. That's not such a huge deal because it might take you a couple seconds to line up your shot anyway, so that you get the most damage out of it. And it's also really useful if you ping or have allies that are pinging whatever big target is there, so you can shoot right through it. This does also technically give you more penetration through ground too, so you can actually shoot even further than you otherwise would. It's also potentially good for getting dreadnoughts to wake up too. That's kind of nice. Coming in at number 6, we have the new Plasma Burster Missiles. Plasma Burster Missiles have always been a very fun overclock for the Hurricane. However, they were very hit or miss before, where they would tend to just go right through something, hit the ground, and blow up and not really do that much damage. So they weren't necessarily one of the strongest overclocks. Since Season 4, though, they have been buffed substantially to where they no longer have such bad pathing. They will intentionally try not to blow themselves up, so you can get way more value from these. And even though on paper, Plasma Burster Missiles looks like a terrible overclock because it halves basically everything. You lose ammo, you lose damage, you lose velocity as well. You lose, I think, area damage. I'm trying to remember what else you lose. I think it's AoE effect. You lose basically everything on it for much more controllable missiles. And that's about it, but these missiles can go off multiple times and get you a lot of DPS now, and they are very strong and very good. They can't one-shot flying rocks anymore, but that was already kind of overpowered on escort missions anyway, so Their one little niche that they had is no longer there, but now they don't need it once they're just competing with some of the best overclocks that Gunner has, in my opinion. Coming in at number 5, we have another Hurricane overclock. This is Salvo Module. This is basically you wanted to use the shotgun for Gunner, and you wanted it to also fire out rockets. This is a very fun overclock. You can load up to 9 of these, fire them out. The more rockets you have, the more damage they do. These are unguided rockets, though, so they're just a shotgun pattern. At close range, doesn't really matter. Longer ranges might matter a decent amount. And you can still tap fire this one rocket at a time, so you can still send it out to hit whatever's on the ceiling, whatever's on the walls, whatever it might be that you need to pick off. You have rockets to still do that. So, not really much of a downside, and it's a very fun overclock to just shotgun big enemies with. Coming in at number 4, we have another Hurricane overclock with Rocket Barrage. This is the brand new overclock that has just been added in Season 4. It has replaced Manual Guidance Cutoff, which, good. I wasn't a fan of Manual Guidance Cutoff at all. This one is way more fun. You have unguided rockets, just like Manual Guidance Cutoff. However, you can shoot them out way faster and you get a ton more ammo. You do less damage with this, but the DPS can actually rack up pretty well. This does do really well against crowds, and it can do decently well against big enemies. It's really fun to stack all the rate of fire with this and have like 12 rate of fire and just fire out the entire magazine in like half a second. Maybe it's 2 seconds. I don't remember exactly how long it actually takes you to fire out the whole thing. That is super fun. I don't think it's as practical as just going with a large 72 round magazine and having the 9 rate of fire. You're still shooting very fast. You're still doing a lot of DPS to enemies, and you actually have a lot of sustained fire with this, so that can be pretty nice. Coming in at number 3, we have Lead Spray for the Burst Pistol. This is a very simple, straightforward overclock that lets you have really high DPS at the cost of your accuracy. So you're not going to be making really long-range shots. Well, you can, because the bullets can still go that far, but they're going to be way more random and spread out. So RNG is going to have to be on your side in order for you to get a lot of value from this, or you're going to have to get up really close and just shove this thing directly in something's face or its weak spot and just empty it in, and it does tons of damage per second to large enemies. If you build it all for damage, it's doing like 30 damage a shot, 90 damage a burst, and even more damage on weak spots, so it's dealing just tons and tons of DPS to even very large targets like Dreadnoughts. You can just shred right through them. It is a super fun overclock to use, although a very basic one. Coming in at number 2, we have Magic Bullets. Magic Bullets for the Revolver is one of my favorite overclocks. I love any of the bouncy round overclocks. Anything that lets me bounce bullets into enemies is going to be a good time, and Magic Bullets lets you do this. This gives you more ammo overall and makes it so whenever you hit nearby an enemy, the bullet will try to bounce into another enemy. That is really cool, especially once you put explosive rounds and you put chemical rounds on this, because then you're just firing it into crowds, splashing poison damage to everything. Bullet bounces off, hits something else, splashes more poison to everything around it. You're slowing everything down, you're doing good DPS, and it's really, really good for crowds. Not so great for big targets, but that's okay. It does have to have some sort of weakness after all. It's just a very fun overclock and a pretty solid overclock for the Revolver if you want to take a secondary that's good for crowd control. And then my number 1 pick here is Bullet Hell. This is for the minigun as well, and this also gives you random bullets. So this makes your minigun way less accurate. You have like 600% more spread, so it's pretty sizable. You can reduce that quite a bit with your tier 1, so that makes it nice. This also nerfs your damage by a decent amount, by like 3 points, which is a huge amount of damage for the minigun to lose, since it doesn't have a whole lot of damage per shot. But in exchange for this, you now have bullets that can bounce into nearby enemies with a 75% chance, I believe. And this was buffed in Season 3 to where it actually works the way that it should now, because I think before it had a less than 75% chance of doing this. I don't know exactly what the chance was, but it is more consistent than it once upon a time was. This isn't necessarily a strong overclock for the minigun. It is a very, very fun overclock, though. And that's what matters the most to me, is what overclocks are very fun and which ones can I use and which ones can I build in a very silly way and just have a lot of fun with. And Bullet Hell hits all of those marks, with it still being okay for crowd control. Not as good as other crowd control options that Gunner has. Magic Bullets is better. Most things with the autocannon are better. Most things with the Hurricane are better. It doesn't matter, though. That's one I still love. It's super fun. So that was my 10 most fun overclocks for Gunner. Tell me your 10 down in the comments below. I would really like to hear them, or which order you would put them if you have a particular order. Again, this wasn't in any real order. I love mixing and matching these together, and it can be a ton of fun just to play around with different builds like this. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care, and bye-bye!